headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
What do you think is going to come of this trip to Ukraine? Is this just a PR opportunity, reassurance being offered to the Ukrainian Prime Minister, or is there some substance to it?
I think I just heard that there's going to be a lump of British aid money going to help the anti-corruption effort in Ukraine. And obviously there is some diplomatic reassurance. But I think what Ukrainians will be saying is until you sort out the dirty money in London, you're not in a terribly good position to lecture us or even help us when it comes to our own anti-corruption efforts. And the background to Boris Johnson's visit is that the government has just made a large step backwards in its efforts to deal with economic crime here and closing some of the gaping loopholes in our own financial system. And so I think all the talk of sanctions and standing up to Putin risks being seen as a sort of empty bombast.
Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? Because we know that NATO is saying they're going to be sending troops, and we're sending an extra 1,000 British troops to Eastern Europe, to the states where part of NATO. But there's been no promise of troops to Ukraine other than those advising on some of the military hardware we've sent. We've had Ukrainians saying, "Look, we're fine. We're happy to fight ourselves. We just need the military hardware." But as you say, a lot of the talk and tough talk from Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, has been about economic sanctions. But you need to hit Vladimir Putin and his cronies where it really hurts. And an awful lot of where their money is in British banks, in London property. And we have been in this country quite happy to be basically the laundromat for Russian dodgy money for many years.
Well, that's absolutely true, Julia. And in fact, various House of Commons committees have referred to Britain as the London laundromat. And I think it's not just Russia. We've been afloat on a sea of foreign money since the collapse of the empire. And we've often been not at all choosy about it. And now, of course, when it's money that's from a country that's a national security threat like Russia, this is coming back to bite us. And I've been worrying about this for years. I gave evidence to the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament about it. They produced what was called the Russia Report. Sorry, that's a plane going overhead. and Boris Johnson tried to squash that report and stop it being published. And since it came out, there's been no action on it. So it's still.
So when we're hearing all this tough talk about, no, we're going to hit them where it hurts, economic sanctions will work, we can be very targeted, and we've spoken to Bill Browder, obviously instrumental in bringing the Magnitsky Act in to actually sort of tackle these issues yesterday about this as well, that actually you're saying that we don't really have the tools or the willingness to do it?
We've got plenty of tools. We just choose not to get them out of the box, or perhaps not even collect them from the shop. But for example, in the time this interview's taken, I could have gone to Companies House website and registered a company called Julia Hartley-Brewer and given my name as Julia Hartley-Brewer, or maybe a company called Talk Radio. And Companies House wouldn't check that, and I would run no risk of exposure or prosecution. So just the simple business of asking Companies House to verify the information that's supplied would already make life difficult, or a little bit more difficult, for the gangsters and money launderers and kleptocrats.
Yes, because the money presumably isn't being held in, V. Putin's name.
No, absolutely not.
From living in the Kremlin in Moscow.
No, you can register as Mickey Mouse from Disneyland there. And the other thing is we don't make any attempt to find out who the beneficial owner is of a company that does business in Britain. So I can, having registered myself in your name as Talk Radio, I can then go buy a penthouse in Mayfair with billions, millions and millions of pounds. And the estate agents won't even make any serious check about where the money comes from. So our system is absolutely wide open to abuse by the worst people in the world. And the government is puzzlingly unwilling to do this. They promised the Americans to, because the Americans are now moving forward on this. The Americans are getting very cross with us, and they'll be even crosser after last week when the government reluctantly admitted that they rather sort of taciturnly admitted that they were dropping the economic crime bill, which was going to be one of the first things to do. So there's a real danger that Britain is seen as all talk and no action on this.
Yeah, and in terms of how Vladimir Putin will be seeing this, you've been a very close Russian watcher for a very long time. Vladimir Putin may realise, well, that phone call was cancelled with Boris Johnson yesterday while he's answering questions about, wine and cheese parties and ABBA songs in Number 10 and things. I mean, he'll just be laughing at all of this. Will he take any of it seriously?
Well, I think that the problem is that Britain's been trashing its reputation for the last few years. I mean, ever since the Brexit vote, politicians abroad have been scratching their heads and saying, what are you guys up to? and there's a real, the European allies don't take us particularly seriously. There hasn't been any sort of consistence. We don't know what our strategy is towards European security. It's never been properly articulated. We're very happy to send an aircraft carrier to China, to the South China Sea, but we don't. No one really knows. Are we seriously engaged in land warfare in Europe like we used to be? We have this token force in Estonia, which is very able soldiers, but it's just 1,000 of them. They have no air defences. They're not really in a position to fight a serious Russian invasion. So it's a tripwire force, and no one really knows in NATO what happens if the tripwire's pulled. There's an enormous reliance on the United States, which is increasingly distracted by China, and under President Biden and previously Trump, not in the greatest political leadership. So European security is in a real mess, and Britain loves to say we're the linchpin, we're the biggest contributor to NATO, we do this and we do that. Yeah. But if you scratch below the surface, it looks pretty flimsy.
Okay, really good to talk to you, Edward Lucas, there. Thank you very much.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.